Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to talk about Deep Space Nine. And as I often said, Deep Space Nine is a series that changed a lot. I didn't actually like the first two seasons, I thought they were extremely boring. But somewhere in season 3 and especially season 4, it suddenly improved greatly, and all the characters evolved and improved, and they became much more interesting, and that includes Captain Sisko as well. If you look back at the first two seasons, when he was just a commander, he almost feels like a completely different character to the way he was later after season 3 and 4. Suddenly he became much more badass, much more of a hothead, much more aggressive, much more willing to compromise his morality to get things done, even if that means doing unnecessary evil. And there's plenty of examples like that. And so I kind of looked back at all of it, and suddenly something clicked in my mind, which might be a very interesting theory, which has to do with the mirror universe. Deep Space Nine had a few episodes of people crossing over back and forth. The first time it happened in season 2 was because of an engine malfunction while traveling through a wormhole, and later they managed to simply use a regular transporter, which was reprogrammed and was able to send people to the other universe, and without switching with the counterpart on the other side. Unlike in the original series, in which when they beamed over, they were replaced with their counterparts, but keeping the clothes of the counterparts. So in Deep Space Nine, it didn't work like that. Instead, it worked like a regular transporter, and people could beam over from one side to the other, and with both versions existing in the same side. And that's an important point to remember. And the second episode about the mirror universe in Deep Space Nine was episode 19 in season 3, which was called Through the Looking Glass, in which Miles O'Brien, who was called Smiley from the mirror universe, teleported to our universe and kidnapped Commander Sisko and took him back to the mirror universe. And there he told him that his Captain Sisko, the one from the mirror universe, was killed in a battle with the Cardassian-Klingon alliance, and his ship blew up. And because he specifically needed Sisko to complete a mission, which had to do with the wife of Sisko, Jennifer, because of that he decided to kidnap the Sisko from our universe and take him to his until he completes the mission, and then presumably goes back to his universe, even though we don't actually see him going back. In the very end of that episode, he tells Smiley, "Send me home," and then they both walk out of the scene and the episode ends. We don't actually see him being sent back to our universe, to the normal universe. And that's how the episode ends. And the interesting thing is that just 2 episodes later, when we see Sisko in the normal universe, suddenly he has a goatee beard. After supposedly being on vacation on Bajor for a while, he comes back home, he meets Jake and hugs him, and Jake suddenly noticed, "What is this? Why do you have a beard suddenly?" So why is this important? Because in the mirror universe, it is very fashionable to wear goatee beards. It's very common in the mirror universe. We've seen that with Mirror Spock, we've seen that with Mirror Sarek, we've seen that with a lot of other characters in the Mirror Universe. It's a very big fashion statement to have a goatee beard. And so this is my first clue that kind of made me think about this theory, that how strange is it that Sisko suddenly decided to grow a goatee beard just 2 episodes after allegedly returning from the Mirror Universe, in which supposedly that other Sisko was killed. So that's the first thing that got me thinking. And also I kind of realized that after this, Sisko kind of became much more badass and much more of a hothead, much more aggressive, much more morality shady, much more willing to do necessary evil, and doing really a lot of criminal activities to get things done. And so that's what got me thinking, what if, and this is just a theory for fun, but what if the Sisko we see from this point on is not actually the original Sisko? What if this Sisko is actually the one from the mirror universe who didn't actually die? Maybe he actually beamed himself out of that exploding ship to our universe. We know it's pretty easy to do this because we saw Smiley using a small device on a regular transporter, and that allows him to beam over to the other universe with a lot of ease. So what if he gave such a device to the other Sisko as well? Or maybe Sisko simply replicated the device that Smiley invented to do the same thing, and so once his ship exploded, maybe he managed to escape to the other universe to save himself, and then decided to live out his life in the other universe since his life is much better there, and he decided to take the place of the real Sisko, whom we never actually saw beaming back. But because in later episodes we did see that Smiley really thought his Sisko is dead, and he brought the other Sisko back again, so Smiley does think that his Sisko is dead, so he doesn't know about what I'm suggesting. So therefore I do believe he sent the real Sisko back to his universe, but maybe the mirror Sisko was somewhere around waiting for an opportunity to replace the real Sisko, and maybe he did that when the real Sisko went on his vacation on Bajor in the episode Explorers, and when he came back to the station, suddenly he had a goatee beard. Even though he didn't have this beard previously in the mirror universe, but it's such a big fashion there that it wouldn't be surprising. Also, maybe he picked the time of the vacation because he needed the time to study the normal universe, to get to know it, to know what to do, how to act, how to pretend to be the real Sisko before he goes back on duty. I also think it's possible he replaced him even before this time. If you look at the previous two episodes, the ones between Through the Looking Glass and the Explorers, there was a two-parter episodes during which the Tal Shiar and the Obsidian Order launched an attack against the Dominion. And during that attack, we see Sisko violating orders. He was given direct orders by an admiral not to get involved, and he disobeyed that order, and he took the Defiant to rescue Odo from the other side. And I think it's the first time we saw him blatantly disobey orders from an admiral. He wasn't like this before. It was kind of unlike him. So maybe it was already the Mirror Universe Sisko who already replaced the real one. And after he came back, he requested to take a long vacation on Bajor, maybe to have time to study the normal universe, to know how to act there as not to be suspicious. And ever since then, he seemed kind of different person to the one he was before all of this. If you look back at the first two seasons of Deep Space Nine, he seems much more polite, he's much more diplomatic, he's much more enlightened, he's much more similar to the kind of Starfleet officer you would expect from watching TNG. He's much more similar to the way Picard was, never doing anything wrong, never doing anything immoral, being a much more gentle human being. And suddenly, since the end of season 3 and onward, suddenly he's aggressive, he's violent, he's willing to do really shady stuff. And just a few examples, he had a personal vendetta against Eddington, so he went to extremes to catch him, such as poisoning a whole planet full of civilians. That's not really something you ever imagine seeing a Starfleet officer do under any circumstances. So he poisoned the planet with hundreds of thousands of humans just to get Eddington to surrender to him. After that, he's the one who basically started the war with the Dominion. And of course, later on during the war itself, Sisko is the one who tricked the Romulans into joining the war by basically performing a false flag attack. He basically tricked the Romulan senator to come to meet him at secret. He got someone to provide a fake recording of a meeting in Cardassia. To get this done, he was willing to bribe people, he was willing to sell materials that can be used to create biogenic weapons. He sold that to unknown parties to get the stuff he needed. And he was an accessory to killing that senator and his guards and the guy who made the holograms. And later on in season 7, after Bashir found a cure to the disease which was killing all the founders, Odo asked Sisko to give that cure to the founders to prevent them all from dying off, and Sisko refused. And then Odo correctly said that if that's the case, then you're basically helping to commit a genocide. And also looking back at the way that Odo was actually infected, it happened during his visit to Earth to Starfleet Command together with Sisko. It was Sisko who actually brought him to Earth, where Odo was initially infected. And then later it was Sisko who personally delivered him. He insisted to deliver him to the planet of the Founders, where Odo infected the rest of the Founders. So I think it can also be argued that maybe Sisko was colluding with Section 31, because all the stuff he did, like tricking the Romulans into the war, is the kind of stuff you would expect Section 31 to do. And then Section 31 started to frequently visit the station, which is also suspicious. Why would they suddenly take such interest in what's happening on the station? Maybe it's because Sisko was there. And then in the first episode about them, when they tried to convince Bashir to join them, and he refused, after that Sisko told him that if an opportunity arises again, he should say to them that he does want to join them. So what if Sisko actually told him to do that because he wanted Bashir to be involved in future operations, and so by telling him that he wants him to be a spy in Section 31 against them, he actually got him, he tricked him into doing the bidding of Section 31, at least for a while. And we also saw that Admiral Ross, who was also very close to Sisko, he was also colluding with Section 31, helping them out as well, and so it's all very suspicious. And because of the stuff that Sisko himself was doing, like tricking the Romulans, that's very close to the things that Section 31 were always doing. And so for all intents and purposes, he's basically the same as Section 31, willing to do necessary evil to save the Federation. And so what if he was actually a member of Section 31? And this theory could work even if it was the original Sisko, not the Mirror Universe one. if the original Sisko changed so much that he was willing to do all those shady things I mentioned, maybe he would be willing to work with Section 31 as well, for all we know. And as for the theory about him being from the mirror universe after he replaced the original, there are a lot of things which would debunk it. First of all, Sisko is the emissary of the prophets, so how come the prophets never said anything about him getting replaced by someone else? But if we really think about it, we know that they also existed in the mirror universe. We know that the wormhole exists there, and we know the wormhole is artificial and was created by the prophets. That means that they exist in the mirror universe also, even though the Bajorans didn't seem to be aware of them. So maybe in that universe they did not get involved with Bajor, since the Bajorans had no idea about them, but they did exist in that universe as well. We also know in the normal universe that they are the ones who actually arranged for Sisko to be born in the first place. That was mentioned in season 7, that they actually sent one of the prophets to possess the mother of Sisko to make sure that she meets his father so that he will be born. So if they were responsible for his birth, then how was he born in the mirror universe? That means they had to arrange his birth in that universe as well. Otherwise it would be an insane coincidence, which might be so because all of the mirror universe is one big insane coincidence because all the same people exist there, which is extremely unlikely considering the radically different history of that universe over centuries of history, and yet the same exact people exist and they live in the same places. That's extremely unlikely. I actually think the only explanation for that whole thing to be possible at all would be if some higher power, if some more advanced intelligent power is actually manipulating all those events, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. So maybe someone like the prophets or even more advanced beings, maybe they are actively making sure that the same people exist in that universe. Why would anyone do such a thing? I have no idea. Maybe it has to do with some kind of cosmic balance between good and evil. Maybe someone deliberately, knowingly created that different universe in which everything is upside down, in which all the good guys are bad and vice versa, for whatever reason. So maybe something like the prophets, maybe the prophets themselves, it could be argued, maybe they are the ones who did that for whatever reason, because we do know that they did this with the Sisko in the real universe. It was stated that they actually arranged his birth, that he was pre-planned by them. And so that had to be done in the mirror universe as well. So it would be argued maybe they're doing that with a lot of people, or some other entities who exist beyond linear time, maybe they are the ones doing that. But that's not important right now, but we do know that the prophets arranged the birth of Sisko in both universes, and that they exist in both universes. So maybe for them it's all the same universe. Maybe they don't really see the differences between universes because they exist outside of linear time, so maybe they are able to transcend all the universes. And so for them, Sisko being replaced by his mirror self is not really a big deal. It's all the same for them. They created that other Sisko as well, so he would still be the emissary for them. And so all the episodes about him as the emissary wouldn't really be surprising, since for them it's the same person who they arranged to create even in the other universe. And so all of that doesn't really contradict my theory. Another problem with this theory of Sisko being from the mirror universe is the fact that in a lot of episodes he does act like a real Starfleet officer. He is very moral as in many episodes, often willing to sacrifice himself to risk his own life, and a lot of stuff like that. But if we think back at the first episode we saw the mirror Sisko in, the episode Crossover, he wasn't really a bad guy. He was kind of bad in the beginning, but then later in the same episode we see that he has a good side to him as well, that he wants to liberate the Terrans, he wants to free all the humans, and so he wasn't really a bad guy. He had a more nasty attitude, but he wasn't all evil, and so if he actually crossed over to the normal universe, he still wouldn't be totally evil. He would still have some good sides to him. He might be slightly more shady character than the original Sisko, the one that we saw in the first 2 seasons, the one who was way too polite. So if he replaced that Sisko, that doesn't mean he's totally evil now, and maybe he didn't even kill him, maybe he got him trapped somewhere, maybe he cryogenically froze him, so maybe the real Sisko is still alive somewhere. And ironically, the mirror Sisko died in the last episode, but the real Sisko could be alive. So it would be kind of interesting if this theory is true. That would mean that the mirror universe Sisko actually saved the Federation in the normal universe because his willing to do necessary evil actually paid off in a lot of ways, because the normal Sisko wouldn't have done all the nasty things that he did. And then the war would not be won. And so it's a very interesting theory in my opinion. Obviously it's very similar to the story in Star Trek Discovery with Captain Lorca, which also kind of saved the Federation. If it wasn't for the mirror Lorca doing all the nasty stuff he did, being so aggressive and so good at war and all those things, maybe if it wasn't for him, the Federation would not have survived And the final clue I want to talk about is that in Star Trek Discovery we've seen that everybody in the mirror universe are much more sensitive to light, which explains why everything is darker. They light everything more darkly. So obviously this is something that was invented in Star Trek Discovery and didn't really exist before, but it is a nice way to explain why everything was much darker in the mirror universe. So did we actually see any clues of Sisko being sensitive to light in Deep Space Nine? I don't think we ever saw it directly, but there were a few episodes in which we kind of see him rubbing his eyes, kind of looking like he has a headache. The episode in which he tried to use the Jem'Hadar device with the special glasses that you hook up to your brain. He seemed to have a very severe headache after using that. So I guess I could find all the places that Sisko kind of rubs his eyes and has a headache. And you know, Deep Space Nine was kind of darker place compared to other Starfleet ships. It did have a darker lighting, even though the Defiant it was often more dark than normal Starfleet ships, so maybe Sisko set it that way because he was sensitive to light. Also, there was an episode called Rapture in which Sisko had some kind of accident, and after the accident he said that he sees everything much brighter than it was before.
Let me ask you something. Does my uniform look any brighter to you?
Yes. Everything does. Colors seem more intense.
But Bashir explained that away, so I guess we can't really use it as proof, because if Bashir confirms that that was a result of that accident, then it can't really be a pre-existing condition. Also, I guess with improved medical technology, maybe Sisko managed to fix his eyes by himself, if he indeed was sensitive to light. Maybe he somehow fixed that before he replaced the real Sisko. Another point that might debunk this whole theory is the fact that when Sisko was on Earth, there was almost that takeover by the head of Starfleet Command, who wanted to become basically a dictator of the Federation, and Sisko is the one who stopped him. So that's kind of suspicious. Why is Sisko so concerned with democracy if he's from the Mirror Universe? But remember, this is the Mirror Universe that exists long after the Terran Empire fell down and collapsed. This is the Sisko that was fighting for freedom in the Mirror Universe, the one who started the rebellion against the Alliance and to free all the human slaves, so presumably he did want freedom and equality for all humans, maybe even for other species, because we saw that the rebels in the Mirror Universe were composed of a lot of species, not just humans. We saw Vulcans, we saw Trill, we saw Ferengi, we saw a whole bunch of species fighting together in the rebellion against the Cardassian and Klingon Empire. So that indicates that he doesn't believe in the old ideals of the Empire. So he probably doesn't want to have another Terran Empire. He probably wants something like the Federation. And since he chose to stay in this universe, that means that he likes this universe. And so maybe that's why he defeated the plans of that admiral to basically turn the Federation into a dictatorship and maybe kind of an empire. So Mirror Sisko wouldn't want that to happen. He would want the Federation to keep existing because, as was mentioned, he grew up in the mines, he grew up as a slave. He wanted freedom, he didn't want tyranny, and so it does make sense for him not to agree with the plans to turn the Federation into a dictatorship. And in that episode in which he first has a beard, we see how much he hugs Jake, how much he misses Jake. The funny thing is that Jake doesn't actually exist in the Mirror Universe, which is kind of strange since everybody else do exist, but Jake apparently never existed there, so why would he be so friendly with him? Maybe it was all part of an act, or maybe he was simply genuinely happy to suddenly have a son. Maybe it's the son he always wanted and never had. Maybe his Jake died in childbirth. Maybe he was aborted as a fetus. Because everybody exists, so he had to exist in some form in the Mirror Universe. So when he saw the real Jake, maybe he was really that happy to see him, and we saw how much he hugs him and so on. And maybe it was one of the reasons he chose to stay in the Federation Universe, because there he has a son, he has a much better life. He probably hated his wife, so he didn't want to go back to his Jennifer. In the Mirror Universe, it was mentioned that they hated each other, and so I do think it makes sense. I do think this theory is actually plausible, and I don't think there's any direct evidence that would completely contradict this theory. I would be glad to hear your opinion. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below, and we can discuss it. I hope you found this entertaining, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.